Okay, so you weren't kidding about these articles being something else. The MeatBeat crew, at first I gotta say, I pictured like, I don't know, a bunch of guys maybe trying to grill some questionable meat, maybe playing some bad music on the side, but a sniper rifle at the Special Olympics, a license to kill that gets revoked. This is like some next level stuff.
What's really fascinating to me is they weren't, just random guys causing trouble. These articles, these articles about the MeatBeat crew, what they do is they paint them as this almost like this rogue, like a rogue offshoot of this bigger, wilder group. And you're not going to believe that the
The
Buttnuggets
Buttnuggets. Okay, I gotta say that's a name that'll stick with you.
really rolls off the tongue. But it seems like the MeatBeat crew, it seems like they were really drawn to chaos, but with you know, but with their own kind of chaotic twist, their own chaotic flavor.
Yeah.
These articles, they point to this very specific, you won't believe this, but they were fascinated with, of all things, bus stops.
Yeah, a lot of bus stop destruction, which I mean, I get it. Waiting for the bus, it can be frustrating, but this is on a whole other level. Like it's almost comical, you know? But it really does make you wonder, was this meant to be some sort of symbolic attack on, I don't know, on order, on just, I don't know, rejection of the mundane, or was it just plain old boredom like manifesting as destruction?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
A very good question. And speaking of chaos,
Hmm.
these articles, they suggest that leading the MeatBeat crew, that must have been like trying to herd cats, but cats on roller skates, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? There are all these stories about these internal conflicts, these power struggles that they had, even physical altercations.
Oh yeah, that article, the one where the menologue, he attacks Kid Beef, and it's over, get this, over plans to rename the group. Talk about a classic power struggle. It's honestly, it's hard to tell what's more surprising, the fact that they even had like any kind of hierarchy, any sort of structure, or that anyone would actually even challenge. Think about challenging someone named the menologue to a joint rolling contest of all things. Apparently, that was their preferred method for like conflict resolution.
It is intriguing, though, how even in all that chaos, even in all of that, these patterns, they emerge. These weren't just random acts, at least not entirely. The MeatBeat crew, with all their chaotic energy, they still seem to have this hierarchy, this pecking order. Even, and this is, you're not going to believe this, even a head of security. And this head of security, according to these reports, was totally obsessed with, get this, weightlifting.
Right, like the world could be crumbling down around you, but these delts need attention. It's almost admirable in a bizarre, in a bizarre sort of way. Speaking of crumbling, though, these articles, they hint at a lot of infighting. A lot of infighting. It's almost like a reality show just waiting to happen. Except instead of those confessionals, they communicated through, vandalism and these cryptic statements that they would give to the press. Remember that whole electric breakfast fiasco?
Yeah, yeah. It's almost as if those internal conflicts, as if that was like fuel to the fire,
Yeah.
Like it fueled all of that chaotic energy,
Yeah.
this constant, all this jostling for power, the shifting alliances, the backstabbing. It adds another layer. It adds another layer to their story, and it makes it juicy.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, were they actually united in all this mayhem, or was it just kind of like every man for himself, But here's where it gets really interesting. You find all this chaos, all this craziness, and then you find out they had this whole other side, like a creative side.
Oh yeah, for sure. Several of these articles here, they mention their music. And get this, their songs. They have these titles like Fight and Nuclear Winter. It's almost like ironic, isn't it? Like you have this group, they're known for basically their destructive tendencies, right? And yet they're out here channeling all that energy into something so structured, so musical.
It's kind of like, I don't know, finding out like your pet Tasmanian devil. It has this secret passion for I don't know, for knitting tiny sweaters. And it wasn't like, they were using professional studios or anything. One of these articles, it mentions a PlayStation, like the game console, a PlayStation and some, I don't know, some basic music software.
It's kind of endearing in a way, isn't it? This whole this juxtaposition, this clash between all the chaos and this like creative spirit. It was like they were like, I don't know, almost like a garage band, just trying to find their sound. Except, their rehearsals probably involved a lot more broken glass.
Mm.
And I'm just saying, probably some questionable substances, too.
Yeah, I can only imagine those outtakes, right? After like a few liters of, I don't know, Buckfast. But speaking of unexpected discoveries, we got to talk about this whole jade monkey thing. I mean,
Tell me.
multiple articles dedicated to what? This multi-year quest
Yeah.
to find a jade monkey.
Right. What was it? Was this a real monkey? Are we talking like a statue? Was this some kind of metaphor to, like, for something deeper? They never explicitly say,
Yeah.
which just makes the whole thing, even more of an enigma.
It's like this bizarre like treasure hunt, but orchestrated by I don't know, by a bunch of like pranksters who may or may not have even understood like the concept of a riddle
Yeah.
and the climax. A dramatic shootout.
And a
But
capture.
it's honestly it's comical, right?
Yeah.
But also a little, I don't know, a little unnerving when you really think about it. And what do they do after they actually like catch this elusive jade monkey? They parade it through the streets tied to a stick, naturally.
It's moments like that. It's just, you got to wonder, were these guys were they intentionally creating chaos, or was this just like their default setting? Like this is just who they are, how they operate. Either way, I mean, you got to admit it makes for a pretty good story. And that's what's so compelling about this deep dive with all these articles. They give us these articles. They're not just like a series of events, a timeline. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like we get this glimpse into this whole subculture, right? That just existed, on the fringes, on the edge, operating by their own set of rules. It's easy. I think it's easy to just dismiss them, to write them off as just like, hooligans. But I don't know. I think there's got to be more to it than that, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. There's like this whole, it's like what happens when the party never ends kind of vibe. Although, I mean, like all parties, eventually, even this one had to end. Yeah, they were something else, right? Chaotic, destructive, but then, creative too, and well, more than a little absurd. Honestly, these articles, they really make you wonder, like what about the stories behind the stories, right? The ones that never actually make it into, I don't know, the history books. What did their chaotic energy, what did it actually build? What did they leave behind?
One thing I find really fascinating is this sense of nostalgia you pick up on in these articles. When some of these former members, they look back on their MeatBeat crew days, there's this, it's like a mix of like fondness,
Mm-hmm.
but also like caution. You know what I mean? It's like they knew, like they were part of something unique, definitely something unique, and maybe even a little dangerous, maybe even a little, I don't know, a little dangerous,
Yeah.
but something that in the end like helped define a certain period, like a certain period of their lives.
Right. Like that crazy ex that you just can't help but tell stories about. They burned bright, they faded fast. It makes you think, I don't know, what remained after all those flames, after they finally died down. Did they really leave the world a better place? Did they leave it, I don't know, maybe more confusing, what with all those smashed bus stops? Or maybe just a more interesting place. I don't know. What do you think?
And it reminds us that, that even the most chaotic times, even those periods, they have an end. The MeatBeat crew, I mean, just like their name suggests, they eventually they burned bright and they faded fast. The question I have is, what, if anything, did they actually leave behind? A couple lo-fi tracks, definitely a whole lot more questions than answers. And I'm just going to say it, probably a few bewildered bus stop manufacturers. But also, I think they left a legacy, however unconventional it might have been. A legacy that still continues to this day, to intrigue, even puzzle those who stumble across their story. It makes you wonder what other mysteries are out there, just tucked away, just waiting to be unearthed. And thanks for taking this deep dive with us. What do you think? Were the MeatBeat crew, were they ultimately a force for good? Were they a symbol of chaos? Or maybe something in between?